Justin Herbert and the Chargers had one of the more disappointing ends to the 2022-2023 NFL season. And there's a lot of things to talk about going into the 2023-2024 season. Can they bounce back? What to expect from Herbert, and all that will be talked about today in this video. So getting into it immediately. Now, Herbert finished the year with 4,739 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. It's actually kind of funny to think like this is considered more of like a down year for Herbert, because like I guess only 25 touchdowns. But I mean, and it's just crazy the level he can play at that this is considered like a little disappointing. Now, the elephant in the room when it comes to talking about Justin Herbert and the Chargers this past year was that playoff game, and we will get to it, I promise. But first, we're going to start out just giving a brief overview of last year. I'm going to zoom in here just so you guys can see this. Now, they opened up against the Raiders, and they looked pretty darn good. And that was a game where Devontae Adams showed out his first game as a Raider, too. It was a close game, and the Chargers came out on top. The Chiefs came down the wire. It was a great game to watch, and I believe it was that game where Herbert got hit in the ribs. And that's something I want to consider and have everybody else consider when they look at this season for Herbert. I'm going to guess that lingered for longer than what was said. Either way, it was a bad injury. Like, it did linger for quite a few weeks. But the thing is like, that type of stuff, the level these guys play at, and considering how every play is just you get hit to the ground, you get hit to some degree, no one is 100%. So the injuries that they are playing through makes them not even close to 100%. And so when you get big injuries like, cracked ribs, whatever, I mean, they're in a lot of pain. It's a lot to play through, especially for a quarterback, all that twisting and moving in the pocket, and you get sacked. It's a lot. I mean, it's definitely a lot. And I think that does reflect on some of the stats. But what's crazy is he's still throwing 57 times a game, 51 times a game, 43 times a game. Like, it didn't really stop the passing attempts, but it maybe affected some of the accuracy sometimes. And again, it was a great year from Herbert. Do not get me wrong. 4,700 yards is a good year. I think it was just the way it ended, mixed with maybe, I think you probably expect more touchdowns from Herbert. And just the Chargers overall, that just kind of like feels like it was worse than what it really was, because on paper, it doesn't really look that bad. But again, there are things to consider, like that rib injury and just the way everything kind of crumbled throughout the year. Even though, again, it doesn't really look like on the stats. That's why there's definitely more to it than the stats. I just kind of had this for reference. But either way, so that's kind of a brief overview. I know I didn't get into a whole lot of things, but I do want to talk about that playoff game. Now, I think we can probably scroll up to see it here. Yeah, so I'm sure everybody probably knows. If you don't know, this game was 27-0, I believe. The Jaguars were losing by that much to the Chargers. I think it was at halftime. And yeah, as you can see, it ended 31-30, and the Jaguars won. That is a problem. Even more so of a problem. The first half, Lawrence threw 4 interceptions against the Chargers and still managed to come back and win, which means that Chargers defense forced 4 turnovers, and you still, or maybe it was 5 actually, and you still were not able to win the game. Now, I want to be very clear on something. People are a little divided on this. Some people give Herbert way too much hate and say that it's his fault because he didn't keep the offense going, didn't keep scoring. Some people say it's the defense's fault that you couldn't, just stop them more. You already stopped that many times. How do you not just whatever? There's a lot. There's a big split on that. And I want to be very clear that this is a team game, okay? It is a team game, meaning Herbert does get some of the blame, but he should not get all of the blame. The things that are in his control are, yes, he probably should have kept moving the ball, stay with that same rhythm he had in the first half, and maybe that's mentally kind of letting up that, like, you're already up by so much, or maybe it's coaching as well, that, oh, we're kind of up, let's just do this, and then slowly that team gets back in it, and before you know it, all of a sudden you got to try and fight to win this game, and then it's too late. So, yes, I think Herbert does deserve a bit of blame just because he is on the team, and I'm sure he holds himself accountable for that as well. You do have to keep those points going. Your defense forces 4 or 5 turnovers. You got to win that game. No questions asked. You got to win that game. Now, away from Herbert, defensively, you forced that many turnovers in the first half, so maybe you're tired from being on the field. I don't really know, but all those turnovers you're getting off the field, so maybe you're scoring too quickly, maybe you're too tired out, or again, maybe mentally you just think the game is over and you just let up. Whatever it was, they blew a 27-0 lead. That's just the truth. They blew a 27-0 lead. And I think it's very surprising to think I mean, there are some quarterbacks, like, let's be, like, Matt Ryan blowing that, no one bats an eye, because that's just kind of what he does, and as a Panthers fan, I love to bring that up. But for Herbert, he is not a player that I think anyone really expect that from. At least me, I would never expected that to be something that Herbert goes through, is kind of being a part of a team that blows a lead like that. But he was, and now we got to move on. We got to move into this year and talk about everything that goes into this, because it is going to be a step mentally, because you came up short in the playoff game, and I think it's so much more than that because you had it won. I mean, even if mentally you're thinking that, which you shouldn't, you should keep your kind of your foot in the gas, finish strong, but you still gotta be thinking, okay, we won. How can I win the game? So it must have been absolutely, I mean, I'm sure stunning does not do it justice of what that must have felt like. But moving into this year, that's behind you. How can you move forward? And that's what I want to talk about. So we're going to go to the Chargers, and we're going to go to the depth chart so we can all kind of be on the same page here when we talk about players and stuff. So you have Justin Herbert, obviously, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and you draft Quentin Johnston. So it's a pretty good offense. I mean, honestly, it's probably a very good offense, but for some reason, sometimes everything just doesn't mesh together like you'd hope. I think injuries are a huge part of that. For whatever reason, the Chargers year after year are so unlucky when it comes to injuries. It's always someone big that's either dealing with an injury or gets hurt and misses time, whether that's Keenan Allen or Joey Bosa or even Mike Williams, or I think it was J.C. Jackson this past year. It happens to the Chargers. For whatever reason, that is a reality that kind of happens to them year after year. So you got to think drafting Quentin Johnston, I think, is big on quite a few different levels, because Allen does miss some time. I think it's kind of overstated almost. Like, yeah, we get it, he misses some time, but also at the same time, I think it's a little exaggerated because he doesn't miss as much time as he's made out to. I think that's more like fantasy football people a little pissed that, like, just kind of how that goes. But you draft Quentin Johnston. Now, I know people whenever he was drafted, people are making jokes like, wow, they drafted another Mike Williams because they're so kind of similar in their play styles. But I think this gives you a lot of stability at receiver. If that's a position that tends to get hurt, then you need more depth there. And that's what they did, because you look behind Quentin Johnston, you have Joshua Palmer. Joshua Palmer actually had quite a few great plays this past year for the Chargers. He came up big for him multiple times. He's not a bad receiver at all. So moving him to like fourth receiver, that's pretty good in my opinion. I mean, because again, he's someone that can come in and still provide you with someone that is pretty solid. You don't draft Quentin Johnston, you have Joshua Palmer in there. Jalen Guyton getting in isn't quite as good as Joshua Palmer getting in. But regardless, I think Quentin Johnston is a great pick. I think he has the opportunity to be a great receiver, and he's in a great offense. I mean, a quarterback to get you the ball. Herbert, you can't ask for much better than a quarterback of his caliber to get you the ball. So he's going to get opportunities. He's in a great offense. And I think the other thing that has to be talked about when it comes to the Chargers is their division, because it's just one of those things where you gotta play the Chiefs, and you have to try and beat the Chiefs to win the division. Granted, the Chargers usually play the Chiefs very, very, very competitively every single year. It nearly goes down to the wire pretty much every single game. Don't always come out on top of those games, but they do give them a good game. And I think that's just it's so exciting about football, or those divisional games where it comes down like that. But Herbert has to bounce back. I think not in the sense of last year was a disappointment, but in the sense of that I'm not going to blow a lead like that again, and I'm going to take another step, because I see the Chargers as a playoff team. Saying that in the AFC is a lot different than saying that in the NFC, because if you say a team is a playoff team in the AFC, that means that it's, Ravens, Bengals, Chiefs, Bills, Jets, Dolphins. There are a lot of teams that are very, very good that are not going to make the playoffs because the AFC is so unbelievably competitive. So saying the Chargers are playoff caliber says a lot of how good they are. It's just tough because you play the Chiefs. But I think Herbert is going to have a big year, because I think it was a bit of a down year as far as touchdowns go. I think the offense is more electric than that. I think Herbert should be throwing for more than that. I think he will throw for more than that. I would say, honestly, probably 10 more. I bet he gets 35 passing touchdowns this year. When you talk about players like Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Josh Allen being MVP candidates, Herbert should not be left out of that. Just because he doesn't have a lot of postseason success yet does not mean he isn't a great player, or that he ever will never, or I guess I phrased that weird, or that he will never have postseason success, because he definitely probably can. He definitely can. He probably will. So I think it's a little harsh to say that already because, yes, he did blow the lead. I mean, I guess, okay, Chargers. I try not to say that. Yes, the Chargers blew the lead. And it is a bad look, but there's so much more to Herbert's game than that. There's so much more to the Chargers than that. When you have guys like Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Quentin Johnston, who are all going to be very, very, I mean, deadly targets when catching the ball. Even Gerald Everett, who had a great year last year. I mean, Herbert has plenty of weapons. All they have to do is stay healthy. That is the biggest obstacle, in my opinion. If they can stay healthy, they are definitely a wildcard team. I don't think they beat the Chiefs for the division title this year, but, I mean, thinking about other type of wildcard teams in the AFC, let's say the Bengals win the division. That means Ravens can make it as the wildcard team. The Chargers are definitely on the Ravens level, in my opinion. At least their offense is better than them. I'm not sure about the defense. Ravens' defense is very, very, very good. But Chargers' offense, I would say, is probably better than the Ravens' offense because of just the sheer amount of weapons they have and the ability to distribute it to everyone is incredibly impressive. So the Chargers are a great team, and I do think Herbert bounced back because, I mean, you have all these guys, how could you not? And it really all comes back to that rib injury. I think it impacted the entire year just because it clearly is not something you just bounce back from instantly 3 weeks later, especially when you can consistently take hits like that. I think Herbert's going to bounce back, and I'm really excited to see how Quentin Johnston fits into this offense. You have Austin Eckler back. Obviously, running backs aren't happy with their pay and everything, but he's back. That's a huge, huge key for the Chargers. This guy is big out of the backfield, big for the receiving game, big for checkdowns. I mean, he makes Herbert's life a lot easier. But again, above all, just got to stay healthy, and I think Herbert and the Chargers have a big year. I think Herbert gets similar passing yards with probably 10 more touchdowns. I think they find the end zone a lot more. I think they were a lot deadlier than they were last year. And I think part of that will be Quentin Johnston being a more jump ball type receiver to get the ball in the end zone, not sell for 3 points. If I'm a Chargers fan, I'm very optimistic that last year's postseason crumble is behind us. Next step, and you look pretty darn good. And also, to finish off the video, I also want to make sure that I just mentioned this at some point. I couldn't really find where to fit it in. I guess maybe at the beginning of the video I could have said it, but I want to close out with it that Herbert's your franchise guy. He just signed, $262.5 million deal for 5 years. He's your franchise guy, highest paid quarterback in the NFL. This is who you believe in. There's no reason to think this guy can't bounce back from the way last year ended. I really don't see any way where he doesn't. So, thank you guys for watching. I do really appreciate it. Be sure to comment down below if you agree or disagree as far as Herbert's kind of upcoming season is going to go from what I've said. We're doing this player prediction video or series for the next, I'm trying to think when you guys are going to see this, 4 days, I think, for the next 4 days. And then it's team prediction series, more in depth over the entire team, offense and defense and coaching and schedule, all that kind of stuff. So, if that sounds interesting to you guys, be sure to subscribe to the channel for all kinds of football content. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.